There is an entire generation of individuals who recall both rotary telephones and the debut of the first iPhone, and psychologists are still struggling to categorize exactly where they belong. If your birth year falls between 1976 and 1985, you are positioned at the tail end of Gen X, yet you are hardly a millennial, despite the constant attempts by society to shove you into one of those predefined boxes. You are what researchers began calling a Xennial around the year 2014. Some sociologists have even designated this group as a microgeneration because the window of time is so incredibly specific. What occurred during that particular slice of history produced something that is genuinely worth examining. Today, we are going to explore what makes this group so interesting from a psychological standpoint. From the very beginning, you spent your childhood in an analog world where boredom was simply something you had to sit with, and where you actually had to memorize phone numbers. Not to mention the sense of dread if you missed your favorite television show, it was just gone. Yet one day, right as you were transitioning into adulthood, the entire world went digital. This did not happen gradually. It happened suddenly. The timing of this massive shift had consequences that are still playing out today. Most generations grow up entirely within one technology paradigm or another. Xennials, however, went through both of these life-defining experiences during the years when you were still in the process of discovering yourself. Your late teens looked vastly different from your 20s, and the disparity in age experience was far wider than what most generations ever encounter. Consider the implications of this shift on your daily life. Remember how much of your teenage years were spent passing physical notes in class or having conversations that simply disappeared into thin air. You made plans where you were not able to text running late, or where are you? You just showed up at the agreed location and hoped your friends would be there. That required a completely different kind of trust and commitment than what exists in our world now. But then you were in your 20s and you saw everyone get cell phones. You registered with Friendster, then MySpace, and then Facebook. Prior to the explosion of social media, most people only had 3 different ways to contact someone, either their home phone, their work phone, or just by showing up at their house. Then suddenly, you had 17 different messaging apps, and you simply figured it out. During your formative years, you experienced both worlds. According to research on brain development, the prefrontal cortex, the region that mediates our ability to adapt to new situations and learn complex skills, is still maturing until roughly the age of 25. A study published in Nature Neuroscience found that this region matures well into the 20s. This means that Xennials were still in this high plasticity window when the technological landscape went through a complete overhaul. You were young enough that picking up new technology felt natural, but old enough to remember exactly what came just before it. Due to being adults when technology first appeared, Gen Zers can sometimes be a bit skeptical of new tech. Millennials, particularly the younger ones, have no real memory of life without the internet. If you are a Xennial, though, you have experienced both things, which has created a kind of bilingualism that is quite rare. You can have a face-to-face conversation without checking your phone every 30 seconds, but you also do not get anxious about learning new software. You remember what it felt like to be genuinely unreachable for hours at a time, which is an experience a lot of younger people simply do not have. But you are also not intimidated by technology, the way some older generations are. And this shows up in ways you might not even notice. For instance, you probably have a different relationship with privacy than other generations. You grew up in a world where your embarrassing moments just faded into memory instead of living forever on social media. That 7th grade haircut, that breakup, or that drunk night at a party. There is no photo evidence. It just exists in the stories people tell. This creates a fundamentally different relationship with your past. Your memories could evolve, could become stories, and could change shape over time the way human memory naturally works. You were not trapped by documentation. Research on autobiographical memory suggests that the way we store and recall personal experiences is actually quite fluid. Our brains are designed to edit memories, keep what matters, and let the rest fade. When everything is permanently documented and searchable, that natural process gets complicated in ways we are still trying to understand. But here is where things get messy. You also entered the job market right around the 2008 financial crisis, which means a lot of you experienced significant economic instability during the exact years when you were supposed to be establishing your careers. That timing matters more than people realize. Research on economic hardship shows that financial trauma during this life stage can have lasting psychological effects. People who experience job loss or financial instability during this life stage often carry those experiences forward even after their situations improve. It shapes how you think about money, security, and risk in ways that do not easily go away. So, you have this generation that learned to adapt to massive technological change, but also got economically burned right when you were trying to build stability. You can navigate change because you had to, but you might also have this underlying current of what if it all falls apart again running through your decision-making. And nobody really talks about this combination. The cultural conversation about generations tends to pit Gen X against millennials, as if everyone born after 1965 and before 2000 is basically the same. But the specific years you were born in, especially during periods of rapid change, create distinct experiences that do not fit into those broad categories. Xennials deal with a paradox that is honestly pretty unusual. You have the self-reliance and skepticism of Gen X, because you grew up before helicopter parenting became standard. Your parents probably did not know where you were for hours at a time, and that was just normal. You learned to solve problems on your own, to entertain yourself, and to deal with boredom and frustration without immediate adult intervention. However, you also reached adulthood during the early days of the internet, when technology was still thought to connect everyone and solve everything. Before we all realized that it might actually be making some things more complicated. It is odd to find yourself there, independent and cooperative, doubtful yet optimistic, digital but analog. What seems to define Xennials is this ability to hold contradictions without it feeling weird. You remember the before and the after, which means you are able to see what was gained and what was lost. Perhaps you are not as nostalgic for the past, in the same way Gen X might be, since you genuinely appreciate modern conveniences too. However, unlike many of the younger generations, you still recognize what we gave up. You lost the ability to be truly alone with your thoughts without effort. You lost the patience that comes from waiting. You lost a certain kind of presence that existed when there was not always something else competing for your attention. But you gained connection, information, and possibilities your younger self could not have imagined. If you are a Xennial, you probably feel like you do not quite fit in anywhere. Too young for some things and too old for others. Caught between two worlds, it is not a fault. That is actually the defining feature of your generation's experience in a world that keeps changing faster than anyone can predict. Having lived through one massive transition might be one of the most valuable things you could have learned. You have adapted to a transitional lifestyle. The environment in which you were raised does not necessarily have to be the one in which you live forever. The Xennial experience is worth knowing about because of that more than anything. Not because you are special in some superior way, but because you lived through a specific moment in history that taught you something the rest of us are still trying to figure out: how to adapt without losing yourself in the process. If this story changed the way you look at the generations that shaped our modern world, please subscribe and like the video. We are uncovering the hidden history and psychological shifts that define who we are today. Join us as we continue to explore the stories they tried to bury. Let's build a deeper understanding of our future together. The next treasure of knowledge will be opened soon.